Gunshots rip through the mountain air. A blind girl, Eliza, pulls her protector, Silas, back just in time. "They're circling us, Silas. 3 men to the east." Her ears, a beacon in the wilderness, detect an unholy plot. They seek a hidden treasure, but this detail, now vital, changes everything. What happens next will decide their fate. Serenity Creek itself was a settlement forged in granite and grit, a harsh land where compassion was a rare, undervalued commodity, and survival often demanded a hardened soul and an unyielding will. It was a place where strength was crudely measured by physical prowess and sharp, observant sight, rendering Eliza an almost unbearable anomaly, an inconvenient truth in their brutal reality. Her days unfolded within the gloomy confines of Corbett's auction house, a grim establishment that trafficked not only in tangible goods, but more disturbingly, in the very destinies of the unfortunate, holding contracts of servitude over those who faltered and found themselves indebted. Here, Eliza existed less as a person and more as a silent, unnoticed specter, her world painted exclusively by sound and touch, a constant symphony of creaking floorboards, the rough rustle of coarse fabrics against skin, the distant clatter of blacksmiths, and the ceaseless judging hum of human voices. The townspeople, robust and fiercely self-reliant, saw her as fundamentally incomplete, a soul adrift, without discernible purpose in a community that valued utility and productivity above all else. They perceived a blank canvas, a window to the world permanently shuttered, utterly failing to grasp that her internal landscape was a rich, intricate tapestry, woven from the unseen and the unheard. Eliza's profound challenge was not merely navigating a world without the benefit of sight, but enduring a world that stubbornly refused to truly see her. With an almost uncanny precision, she learned to discern the true intent behind a man's hurried footsteps, to catch the subtle shift in a woman's breath that preceded a cruel comment, or to interpret the cynical clinking of coins that sealed yet another person's unfortunate fate. Yet, amidst the grating cacophony of human indifference and the constant threat of being overlooked, Eliza found her profoundest solace in the subtler, more honest sounds of existence. She cherished the gentle, whispered brush of wind against her skin, a sensation that told her of approaching changes in weather, and the distant, constant murmur of the creek, a language of nature that, unlike deceptive human words, offered pure, unadulterated truth. She valued the quiet moments when the town's clamor grew still, allowing her to truly listen, to feel the deep, resonant vibrations of life beneath her bare feet, connecting her to the very pulse of the earth in a way others, preoccupied with what they could see, never experienced. These were the fleeting, precious moments of genuine peace, small, profound pockets of calm in a life largely defined by the anxieties and unyielding rejections of others. The townsfolk, with their sharp, narrow eyes fixed solely on superficial imperfections and tangible lacks, utterly failed to perceive the extraordinary gift that had not merely compensated for her blindness, but had blossomed within Eliza into something far greater. They pitied her for what they believed she lacked, never once suspecting that her apparent handicap had honed her remaining senses, particularly her hearing, to an almost supernatural degree. Her auditory perception was not simply acute. It was an intricate, highly sensitive instrument, capable of dissecting the world into its purest, most essential components. She could differentiate the minute, subtle variations in a person's heartbeat, infer their deepest emotions from the slightest tremor in a voice, and predict the approach of a brewing storm by the almost imperceptible change in the wind's song, long before any dark cloud dared to stain the clear mountain sky. What they casually dismissed as an affliction was, in truth, a gateway to a profound and undeniable awareness, an intimate, almost primal understanding of the world's true rhythm and hidden currents, a deep wisdom that perpetually eluded the sighted, who often mistakenly believed that what they witnessed with their eyes constituted the entirety of truth. This unseen, intricate connection to the vibrant pulse of life made her, in her own unique and remarkable way, more attuned to the raw, unfiltered reality than those who boasted perfect vision. Under Corbett's unyielding thumb, Eliza's precarious future was a constant, unspoken negotiation, her inherent value assessed solely by the meager, practical contributions she might possibly offer, in a world that relentlessly categorized her as unproductive. The heavy, oppressive atmosphere of the auction house, with its pervasive scent of stale wood, desperate hope, and even more desperate resignation, was her constant, unwelcome companion. She heard the increasingly frantic preparations for another of Corbett's notorious sales, the hushed, greedy conversations about the next unfortunate soul, whose life would inevitably be bargained away. A particular, palpable tension hung in the air that day, a profound sense of impending, inescapable change, like the immense pressure that precedes a deafening thunderclap. The usual hubbub and familiar clamor of the town seemed to subtly ebb, replaced by a low, almost primal, expectant hum. Eliza felt it deep within her, a strange, undeniable ripple of anticipation, a profound shift in the very currents of fate. New, distinct sounds began to emerge from the dusty road leading into town, heavier, far more deliberate and resonant than the usual, familiar foot traffic. A profound, almost unnerving silence descended abruptly upon the townsfolk, their collective breath held captive, as a very distinct, unhurried rhythm of incredibly heavy boots approached steadily, announcing the dramatic arrival of something, or someone, entirely new and utterly formidable, a presence destined to irrevocably alter the course of Eliza's quiet, solitary existence. The distant, powerful rumble grew steadily closer, a force unlike any she had ever known, signaling with undeniable certainty that her fragile world, already on the precarious brink of despair, was about to be profoundly, dramatically, and irreversibly reshaped. The world, for Eliza, was a symphony of echoes, and on that fateful day, the harsh, discordant notes of Serenity Creek intensified to an unbearable crescendo. A hush, thick and unnatural, descended upon the boisterous marketplace, chilling the very air. It was not a silence born of respect, but of awe, a palpable anticipation that rippled through the crowd like a cold front. Eliza, sensing the shift, felt a prickle of unease trace its way up her spine. Then came a sound, distinct and profound, resonating with the weight of ancient stone and solitary pine, the deliberate, unhurried tread of heavy boots, each step a declaration, closer, closer, until the very ground seemed to vibrate with a presence that belonged not to the town, but to something wilder, older, undeniably formidable. This was Silas, the mountain man, a figure whispered about in hushed tones around late-night fires, a phantom carved from the very granite peaks that loomed menacingly over the valley. His arrival was like the sudden stillness before a storm, his very being a challenge to the petty squabbles and loud boastings of the town. He stood there, a silent sentinel, his presence so commanding that even the ever-booming voice of Corbett, the auctioneer of human fates, momentarily faltered, swallowed by the sudden, overwhelming silence. Eliza, unable to see him, felt his raw, untamed essence with a primal clarity, an unexpected anchor in her whirlwind of fear. He radiated an aura of immense solitude, a man sculpted by the harsh, unyielding hand of the wilderness, bearing the invisible scars of a life lived far beyond the reach of human judgment. Corbett, regaining his usual bluster, began to speak, his voice once again booming, yet now with an undercurrent of nervous haste. He had a debt to settle, a contract of servitude to sell, and the object of his transaction was Eliza herself. He described her not as a person, but as a burden, an unfortunate circumstance, a broken animal whose only possible utility lay in being tethered to another's will. The crowd, emboldened by Corbett's callous assessment, began to jeer and scoff, their cruel laughter echoing through the square. "What good is a blind girl?" one voice sneered, thick with contempt. "What would a mountain man want with a creature who cannot even see to chop wood?" Another mocked, and the chorus of dismissive, heartless questions swelled around Eliza, each word a physical blow, an affirmation of her perceived worthlessness. She stood there, trembling, every nerve exposed, every insult absorbed and etched onto her heart. Her only desire was to vanish, to dissolve into the dust and be spared the exquisite agony of public humiliation. Yet, amidst the venomous tide of derision, Eliza discerned a different sound, a subtle shift in the air, a quiet intensity emanating from the formidable stranger. Silas watched, his gaze penetrating beyond the surface, beyond the veil of her blindness, perceiving not a broken girl, but a reflection of his own profound rejection. He saw the proud, defiant set of her shoulders, the tremor in her hands, the way she held herself, poised yet vulnerable, absorbing the world through senses the townsfolk deemed insignificant. He saw an unspoken kinship, a mirrored existence of solitude and misunderstanding. In her tense, unyielding posture, he recognized the echo of his own isolated life, a soul cast aside by a world that valued superficial appearances over genuine essence. Then, a voice, deep and resonant, cut through the jeering like a sharpened blade through ice. It was Silas. He spoke no words, offered no explanation, merely a definitive, heavy clinking of coins. The sum was declared, a price paid for her contract, silencing the entire square in a single, stunned moment. The crowd gasped, then murmured, their shock quickly morphing into outright scorn. To them, he had bought a liability, a folly, a blind girl they had unanimously deemed worthless. They saw ownership, another burden traded. But Silas, in that singular, decisive act, had not purchased property. He had offered liberation. He had paid the price for a trapped creature, not to own her, but to set her free from the shackles of their judgment, to release her from a cage made of derision and neglect. Eliza, disoriented, could not comprehend the sudden, jarring shift. One moment she was an object of ridicule, destined for another form of servitude. The next, a large, calloused hand, rough yet surprisingly gentle, enclosed hers. The hand, warm and firm, guided her away from the gaping, silent mouths of the townsfolk, away from the suffocating stench of their contempt. Each step took her further from the familiar, if cruel, sounds of Serenity Creek, towards the rising, imposing silhouette of the mountains, their peaks a harsh, unyielding promise. The dust of the town gave way to the rough, uneven terrain of the ascending path, a steep and challenging climb that felt like a baptism of fire. The air, thin and bracing, carried the clean scent of pine and damp earth, a stark contrast to the stale, crowded smells of the village. The cacophony of human voices faded, replaced by the whispering wind and the distant, constant murmur of the wilderness. Silas, her silent guide, moved with an effortless grace that spoke of years spent navigating these formidable heights. He offered no words of comfort, no explanations, only the steady, unwavering pressure of his hand, leading her onward and upward. Eliza stumbled, faltered, fear warring with a strange, nascent curiosity. What awaited her in this unknown, wild expanse? Was this merely a different kind of prison? A new form of servitude hidden amongst the towering trees and unforgiving rock? Yet, as she ascended, a subtle shift began within her. The sharp, venomous echoes of Serenity Creek began to recede, replaced by the honest, unfiltered sounds of nature, the rustle of unseen leaves, the distant cry of an eagle, the rush of an unseen river. Here, there was no judgment in the wind, no scorn in the rustling branches. With each difficult step, the old world, defined by narrow town limits and cruelly whispered insults, dissolved further behind her. She was no longer walking on familiar, despised ground, but on the very edge of the known, stepping into a vast, uncharted wilderness, guided by a man whose purpose remained shrouded in mystery. The path grew steeper, the air colder, and the silence around them deepened, broken only by the rhythmic scuff of their boots and the relentless beat of her own bewildered heart. She felt the chill of the mountain air on her face, the rough texture of the rocky ground beneath her worn shoes, and the unwavering, unyielding grip of the mountain man's hand. Ahead lay only the unknown, an ascent into a world as vast and untamed as the man who now led her, inextricably binding her fate to his, in the profound, silent embrace of the wild. The ascent was relentless, a silent, arduous journey away from the known world. Each upward step, guided by the unyielding hand of Silas, was a severing of ties, a deliberate movement towards an existence untainted by the judgment of men. Eliza, battered and bewildered, felt the mountain air grow colder, sharper, purifying her lungs with its wild embrace. The sounds of Serenity Creek, the mocking laughter, the disdainful murmurs, faded into an indistinct hum, eventually swallowed by the vast, encompassing silence of the wilderness. Now, only the honest whispers of the wind, the rhythmic rustle of unseen leaves, and the distant, ever-present murmur of a mountain stream accompanied their progress. Finally, as dusk began to paint the sky in hues of deep violet and fading orange, Silas paused. Eliza felt the shift in his posture, the subtle cessation of movement that indicated their destination was near. The air grew thick with the scent of wood smoke, earthy and comforting, a stark contrast to the acrid odors of the town. She heard the soft crackle of a hidden fire, a beacon of warmth in the encroaching chill. Before them, nestled into the rugged embrace of the mountain, stood a structure. It was not the grand, imposing architecture of the lowlands, but a humble, sturdy dwelling, crafted from rough-hewn logs and chinked with mud and moss. It smelled of aged timber, of cured hides, and of the enduring spirit of survival. This was Silas's world, his sanctuary carved out of the unforgiving landscape. To Eliza, it was an alien place, a stark departure from the crowded, judgmental confines she had always known. The air here was alive with a different kind of sound, the subtle creak of settling logs, the distant howl of a lone wolf, the soft sifting of pine needles underfoot. Silas released her hand, the sudden absence of his touch a jarring reminder of her vulnerability. He opened a heavy wooden door, and Eliza felt a rush of warm, smoky air envelop her, pulling her into the unknown. The interior of the cabin was a symphony of practical necessity and quiet solitude. Eliza's other senses, sharpened by the absence of sight, instantly absorbed every detail. The floor was packed earth, firm beneath her worn boots. The air was thick with the scent of pine pitch, drying herbs, and the lingering aroma of stew, a nourishing, earthy fragrance. A stone hearth, radiating a comforting, steady heat, was the cabin's beating heart, its gentle crackle a soothing counterpoint to the wild silence outside. She heard the distinct, methodical ticking of a grandfather clock in one corner, a stark reminder of measured time, even in this timeless wilderness. Shelves, rough-hewn and sturdy, lined the walls, laden with jars of preserved foods, bundles of dried plants, and a variety of tools, axes, knives, traps, each item a testament to a life lived in stark self-reliance. A thick, coarse hide, likely bear or elk, served as a blanket on a simple cot in the corner, exuding a wild animal warmth. Silas, a man of few words, moved with an economy of motion that spoke volumes. He offered no grand pronouncements, no flowery speeches of welcome. His actions were his language, clear and unambiguous. He gestured towards a rough-hewn stool near the fire, a simple invitation to rest. He offered her a mug of hot, fragrant herbal tea, its warmth seeping into her chilled hands, and a plate of plain, nourishing food, dried meat, a hard biscuit, wild berries. He did not treat her with pity, but with a practical expectation, a silent assessment of her capabilities and her potential. His silence was not dismissive, but observational, a quiet assessment of this unexpected guest who had so abruptly entered his solitary world. Eliza, overwhelmed by the sensory richness of this new environment, remained largely silent, absorbing everything. She felt the rough texture of the stool beneath her, the warmth of the mug, the subtle taste of the herbs. She heard the soft hiss of the fire, the distant wind, the steady, reassuring beat of Silas's heart as he moved about the cabin. Her initial fear slowly began to give way to a cautious sense of wonder. Here, in this remote haven, there were no judging eyes, no sneering voices. There was only the honest, unvarnished truth of survival, the raw reality of the mountain. The tension between them, though unspoken, was palpable. He was a recluse, accustomed to the profound solitude of his existence, his routines as ancient and unyielding as the mountains themselves. She was a refugee, a bewildered soul cast adrift, seeking refuge from a world that had rejected her. He had brought her here, an act of bewildering generosity, yet the question hung heavy in the air: what was expected of her? What price did freedom demand in this isolated realm? His hesitation was clear, not in his actions, but in the subtle stiffness of his posture, the slight delay in his movements. Her presence was an intrusion, a disruption to the carefully ordered solitude he had meticulously built for himself over years. Yet despite his reserved nature, Silas also recognized a profound, almost unsettling echo of his own past in the young woman before him. He saw the resilience in her posture, the quiet determination in her stillness, the strength born of enduring hardship. He saw not a burden, but a kindred spirit, a fellow outcast in a world that often punished difference. He understood the silent language of rejection, the subtle weight of being misunderstood. He had seen the disdain in the townspeople's eyes, heard the contempt in their voices, a mirror reflecting the judgment he himself had faced when he chose the path of the mountain. As the fire crackled and the cabin settled into a comfortable warmth, Silas finally broke the profound silence that had enveloped them since their arrival. His voice, deep and resonant, was stripped of all extraneous emotion, direct and unyielding, like the mountain itself. He spoke not of charity, but of a harsh, inescapable reality, a contract far more ancient than any Corbett could impose. He did not offer comfort, but an opportunity for sanctuary, a chance to rebuild a life on the mountain's terms. The words he spoke were not an invitation to ease, but a solemn declaration of the unforgiving truth of this place. He would allow her to stay, he stated, his voice steady and unwavering, but only if she understood the unspoken pact between them. This was a place of work, of contribution, of respect for the rules of the wild. The mountain offered protection but demanded an unwavering commitment in return. It would not tolerate idleness, nor would it brook dependence. There would be no pity, only the harsh, honest truths of survival. Her purpose here would be found in her utility, in her ability to adapt, to contribute to the delicate balance of their existence. The sanctuary he offered was not a gift of soft comfort, but a demanding partnership, a haven forged in the very crucible of necessity, where every breath, every action, carried meaning. For Eliza, who had only ever known what she could not do, the mountain man's words were a stark, challenging new beginning, an invitation to prove her worth not to a judging crowd, but to the unyielding, honest silence of the wilderness itself. The mountain awakened Eliza not with gentle encouragement, but with the bracing, often brutal realities of survival. Silas, true to his nature, offered no coddling. His lessons were dispensed through action, his instructions sparse yet precise, a silent choreography of necessity. He showed her how to distinguish the chill of an approaching storm from the bite of an ordinary winter morning, how to feel the subtle vibration of a passing animal through the packed earth, and how to identify the texture of medicinal plants by their leaves and stems, even by the unique scent of their crushed essence. His methods were primal, demanding, forcing Eliza to rely on her heightened senses in ways she had never before imagined. Her days were now a tapestry woven with new sounds, textures, and responsibilities. The rough-hewn floor beneath her bare feet became a familiar map, each knot and splinter a landmark. The scent of pine and wood smoke became the very breath of her existence. She learned the rhythmic clatter of a hand axe splitting logs, the satisfying thud of wood hitting the stack, and the delicate rustle of dried herbs being sorted. Silas, observing her with his keen, silent gaze, saw a determination that belied her delicate frame. She never complained, never shirked. Her blindness, which had been a heavy chain in Serenity Creek, was here not a limitation, but an amplifier, sharpening her other senses to an almost uncanny degree. He tasked her with chores that required precision and focus. She learned to mend torn clothes, her nimble fingers weaving thread through fabric with remarkable speed and accuracy, guided by touch alone. She learned to prepare simple meals, her ears guiding her to the precise sizzle of meat on the pan, the gentle bubbling of boiling water, the soft crush of dried berries. The cabin, once a mere shelter for him, began to subtly transform under her hands. Her presence, initially an intrusion, slowly began to feel like a quiet, comforting presence, a harmonious counterpoint to his own gruff solitude. One brisk morning, a sudden, chilling wind swept through the valley, promising an early, brutal winter. Silas, preparing to check his traps high on the ridge, was preoccupied, his brow furrowed with the concerns of survival. He grumbled about a tear in his thick, winter-worn cloak, a vulnerability that could prove fatal in the biting cold. Eliza, overhearing his quiet complaint, did not hesitate. With nimble fingers, guided by memory and touch, she found her small sewing kit, a collection of needles and threads she had brought from the town. She set to work, her hands moving with quiet intensity, stitching the thick fabric with a precision that amazed even Silas, who watched her from the corner of his eye. Her stitches were strong, even, invisible in their neatness, transforming the tear from a dangerous flaw into a minor inconvenience. It was more than just mending a cloak. It was an act of quiet care, an unexpected comfort offered in a world that seldom allowed for such tender gestures. Silas, typically stoic and reserved, felt a strange warmth spread through him. He had taken her in, seeing only a shared burden of rejection. He had presumed he was the rescuer, offering her sanctuary from the harshness of the lowlands. Yet, in these quiet, everyday acts, Eliza was slowly, undeniably rescuing him from his own profound solitude. Her hands, once deemed useless by the sighted, were now weaving not just fabric, but a sense of warmth and order into his stark existence. She possessed a skill, a quality, that Silas had initially overlooked in his practical assessment of her survival value. It was not physical strength, for which he had no need, but a profound emotional resilience, a gentle kindness and an innate domestic competence that began to subtly reshape his desolate life. The cabin, which had always been merely a functional place of solitary survival, began to take on the undeniable warmth of a home. The scent of fresh bread, baked by her hands, now occasionally mingled with the scent of pine and smoke. The rough-hewn table, once perpetually bare, sometimes held a small, carefully arranged bouquet of dried wildflowers she had gathered and identified by feel and scent. Eliza began to organize his tools, his furs, his supplies, her keen sense of touch and memory creating a new order in his previously chaotic, albeit functional, space. Silas, a creature of habit, found himself subtly adjusting, his movements more efficient, his days infused with an unexpected, gentle rhythm. He found things where he expected them to be, his worn boots precisely by the door, his hunting knives neatly arranged. She did not speak of love or affection, but her actions, small yet consistent, were a more profound testament to care than any words could convey. She made him soup when he returned from a grueling hunt, the broth seasoned with herbs she had identified with a delicate sniff. She repaired his worn leather straps, her fingers working tirelessly until the leather was strong again. The mountain man, who had prided himself on his self-sufficiency, found himself slowly, almost imperceptibly, becoming reliant on her quiet competence. He had brought her to his mountain, thinking he would simply tolerate her presence, perhaps even train her to be a silent, unobtrusive helpmate. Instead, she was transforming his world, infusing it with a gentle, persistent warmth he had never known. She was not a burden, but an unexpected blessing, a new pair of eyes for his spirit, guiding him to a softer, richer existence. One evening, as a furious blizzard raged outside, trapping them within the small cabin, Eliza was meticulously sorting through a small pile of dried beans, her fingers moving with familiar grace. Silas watched her, a rare, thoughtful expression on his rugged face. He saw not a blind girl, but a woman of profound strength, whose perception far surpassed the sight of most men. Just as he was about to voice this nascent understanding, a new sound, sharp and urgent, sliced through the howl of the wind and the crackle of the fire. It was the desperate, frantic cry of a trapped animal, agonizingly close to the cabin. The sound was immediately followed by another, deeper and more menacing, the unmistakable growl of a much larger predator. Eliza stiffened, her sorting forgotten, her head turning sharply towards the sound, her face a mask of sudden, profound fear. The fragile peace they had cultivated, the burgeoning warmth of their shared existence, was abruptly shattered by the brutal, undeniable call of the wild and the harsh, dangerous realities it constantly held at bay. The outside world, untamed and merciless, was reminding them of its formidable presence, demanding their immediate attention. The blizzard raged outside, a ferocious symphony of wind and ice, rattling the very foundations of Silas's cabin. But within, a different kind of storm brewed, ignited by the desperate, piercing cry of a creature in distress, followed by the low, guttural growl of a predator. Eliza, her every nerve alight, recognized the sounds with an intimate, chilling clarity. It was a young deer caught in one of Silas's lesser-used traps, its cries now muffled by the snow and the looming threat of a timber wolf. The proximity of the sounds suggested the animals were dangerously close to the cabin, a rare and unsettling occurrence. Silas, ever the hunter, grabbed his rifle, his movements swift and practiced. He knew the perils of intervening in such a struggle, especially in a blizzard, but the deer, if salvaged, would provide much-needed meat through the long winter. He moved towards the door, ready to brave the storm. But Eliza, her face pale but resolute, placed a firm hand on his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Her hearing, honed by years of darkness, had caught a detail he, with his eyes, had missed. "Wait," she urged, her voice low but urgent, cutting through the storm's roar. "The growl, it's not a single wolf. There are others. And the deer, it's not just caught, it's injured badly. The scent of blood is strong." She spoke of scents and subtle shifts in the growl's cadence, details utterly invisible to him. Silas hesitated, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He had assumed a lone wolf, a quick, decisive kill. But Eliza's assessment, based on the nuanced tapestry of sound and scent, painted a far more dangerous picture. A pack, drawn by the scent of fresh blood, closing in on a wounded prey near their sanctuary. The stakes were suddenly much higher. To venture out now, into the blizzard and against a pack of wolves, was an act of extreme peril. Yet, to let the deer fall to the predators so close to his cabin meant risking the wolves growing bolder, their territory shrinking ever closer to his home. Eliza, sensing his internal conflict, continued, her voice gaining a quiet authority. "We need to scare them, not fight them. The trap is too close to the north ridge, the wind funnels right through there. If we light a flare, the wind will carry the scent of smoke and the sound of the crackle far and wide. It will make them think there are many of us." Silas stared at her, a profound realization dawning in his eyes. He, the seasoned mountain man, reliant on his sight and strength, had been preparing for a brute force confrontation. Eliza, the blind girl, had proposed a tactical solution, born of an intimate understanding of the mountain's currents, the wind's whims, and the animal's instincts. She understood the language of the wild more deeply than he, for she had always listened to its subtlest whispers. Her perception was not just a substitute for sight, it was a superior form of wisdom. Trusting her implicitly, Silas retrieved a large, resin-soaked torch and a pouch of dried, pungent herbs. With Eliza's guidance, he opened the cabin door just enough to launch the torch, already aflame, into the raging wind, aiming it towards the northern ridge where the sounds of the struggle were most concentrated. The blazing torch, a fiery comet against the white tempest, caught the wind and soared, landing with a satisfying hiss in a snowdrift. Simultaneously, Silas threw a handful of the dried herbs into the roaring hearth, sending a plume of acrid, unfamiliar smoke up the chimney, to be carried by the fierce winds across the valley. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The wolves, disoriented by the sudden flash of light, the unfamiliar scent, and the amplified crackle of the burning torch carried by the funneling wind let out a chorus of confused yelps and retreating snarls. The sounds grew fainter, receding into the blizzard, until only the howl of the wind remained. The immediate danger had passed, averted not by confrontation, but by cunning and a profound understanding of the natural world. Silas, standing in the relative calm of the cabin, looked at Eliza, a profound shift in his perception now complete. He had saved her from Serenity Creek, but she, in turn, had saved him from his own limited perspective, from the brute force approach that might have cost him his life. The crisis, once a terrifying threat, had become the crucible in which their partnership was truly forged. The tension between them, once a wall of unspoken questions, dissolved into an unspoken understanding. In the quiet aftermath, as the blizzard continued its relentless assault, a new kind of warmth settled between them, far deeper than the crackle of the hearth. Silas, his voice rough with emotion, spoke of his past, the deep, raw wound of loss that had driven him to the solitude of the mountains. He spoke of the betrayal, the heartbreak, the reason he had chosen to abandon the world of men and seek refuge in the unforgiving embrace of the wild, burying his grief in the vast, silent wilderness. His words, usually so guarded, flowed with an uncharacteristic candor, a dam breaking under the weight of shared experience. Eliza, in turn, confessed the profound agony of her own past, the deep, pervasive wound of abandonment. She spoke of the constant, soul-crushing rejection she had faced, not just for her blindness but for her perceived lack of worth, her inability to fit into the narrow confines of Serenity Creek's expectations. She spoke of her parents' shame, the quiet despair that led them to give her over to Corbett, seeing her as little more than an unmanageable burden, a ghost in their own lives. Her voice, usually so quiet, now carried the weight of years of unspoken pain, a raw testament to the profound loneliness she had carried. In that small cabin, against the roaring backdrop of the blizzard, two outcasts, bound by their profound shared solitude, finally laid bare their deepest wounds. Their truth was not an external secret, but the raw, vulnerable unveiling of their souls, a testament to the profound commonality of their suffering. In their shared confessions, a partnership was sealed, not merely of survival, but of mutual healing, an understanding that transcended words. They were two broken halves, finding an unexpected, profound wholeness in each other's unspoken understanding. Two solitary souls finding a unique, undeniable home in the other's acceptance. The next morning, the blizzard began to recede, leaving behind a pristine, untouched world cloaked in a thick blanket of snow. The air was crisp, the silence profound. Silas, now seeing Eliza not as a liability but as an invaluable partner, set out to check on the trapped deer. He found it freed from the trap but still badly injured, too weak to move. He brought it back to the cabin, intending to put it out of its misery quickly. But Eliza, her ears now tuned to the animal's shallow, desperate breaths, made an unexpected plea. She could tend to it, she insisted. Her knowledge of herbs and gentle care, gleaned from years of simply listening to the natural world, was profound. Silas, his hardened heart softened by her quiet resolve, found himself in a peculiar position. He had rescued her, and now she was asking him to allow her to rescue a creature of the wild. He knew the chances were slim, but as he looked into her determined, sightless eyes, he found himself utterly incapable of denying her. He had seen her magic, her unique way of listening to the world, and for the first time in many years, he dared to believe in the impossible. In the quiet aftermath of the blizzard, a new rhythm settled into the mountain cabin. The air, once thick with tension, and the unspoken burdens of two solitary souls, now hummed with a different kind of energy, a gentle symphony of shared purpose and nascent trust. The wounded deer, surprisingly, became the crucible for their deepening connection. Eliza, with a profound tenderness, became its devoted caretaker. Guided by the unique language of her senses, she mixed poultices from dried herbs, gently cleaned its wounds with warm water, and offered it small sips of broth, her soft whispers a constant balm. Silas, initially skeptical, watched her work with a quiet awe. He had spent his life among the stoic, brutal realities of the wild, where weakness was quickly culled, and sentimentality was a luxury few could afford. Yet, Eliza's unwavering compassion, her patient dedication to the fragile creature, slowly chipped away at his hardened exterior. He found himself bringing her specific plants she described by scent and texture, assisting her with the heavy lifting, becoming a silent accomplice in her improbable act of mercy. In tending to the deer, they were, in a profound sense, tending to each other's unspoken wounds, healing the deep-seated hurts that had driven them both to the edges of human society. Their days now unfolded in a comfortable, almost domestic dance. Silas would return from his traps or hunting expeditions, the scent of pine and fresh snow clinging to his heavy furs, to the comforting aroma of Eliza's cooking. She would be by the hearth, perhaps mending a garment, or preparing herbs, her presence a steady, warm anchor in the solitary expanse of his cabin. In the evenings, as the fire cast flickering shadows on the log walls, they would share simple meals, their conversations no longer centered on survival alone, but on the quiet stories of their day, the subtle changes in the mountain, the gradual mending of the deer. One particular evening, as the fire crackled, casting a golden glow on their faces, Silas, for the first time, revealed a fragment of his past that linked him to the valley below. He spoke of an old, tattered map, passed down through generations of his family, showing ancient trapping grounds and forgotten paths. He had always dismissed it as mere lore, but the map also hinted at a legendary hidden spring, said to possess healing properties, a place his ancestors once held sacred. He had sought it in his youth, driven by a flicker of hope to heal a loved one, but had failed, its precise location forever shrouded in local myth. He spoke of its vague markings, lines that seemed to point not to a specific location, but to an ancient, unnamed landmark, a twin waterfall according to the faded annotations. Eliza, listening intently, felt a strange ripple of recognition. She too possessed a small, carved wooden locket, given to her by her true mother before she was abandoned, a simple, unassuming trinket that she had kept hidden from Corbett. Inside, not a picture, but a tiny, intricately etched depiction of two parallel waterfalls, a symbol her mother had whispered was unique to their ancestral lands, a place of peace and belonging. The locket had always been her only tangible link to a family she barely remembered, a silent promise of a home that truly welcomed her. It was a detail she had never thought to share, a secret locked away with her deepest fears. Now, as Silas spoke of the twin waterfall on his map, the words struck her with the force of a physical blow. The two separate fragments of their pasts, held in his faded map and her small secret locket, suddenly coalesced into a stunning, undeniable connection. Their destinies, it seemed, had been woven together long before they ever met, their lineages perhaps intertwined through generations, destined to converge in this wild, isolated sanctuary. This was not a coincidence. It was fate, an ancient echo reaching across time to bind their souls. The revelation deepened their bond, infusing their companionship with a profound sense of predestination, a feeling that their meeting was not merely chance but a part of a larger, unfolding narrative. They were not just two outcasts who found solace. They were two pieces of an ancient puzzle, finally fitting together, their individual histories converging in the quiet heart of the mountains. The cabin, their home, became more than just a place of refuge. It was a testament to their shared heritage, a silent monument to the families they had lost and the one they were now building. But the mountain, for all its beauty and solace, was never truly isolated. The world below, with its ceaseless greed and relentless claims, had a way of reaching even the most secluded havens. As Eliza and Silas sat by the fire, basking in the newfound warmth of their shared history, a subtle change rippled through the crisp night air. It was a sound, faint at first, then growing steadily louder, a discordant intrusion into the mountain's peaceful symphony, the distinct rhythmic clatter of multiple hooves, and the muted, rough voices of men on horseback, not the local trappers, but something far more menacing, something organized and purposeful. The sound, carried on the cold night wind, was unmistakable, growing closer with each passing moment. An undeniable tremor of menace ascending their secluded trail. The peace so hard-won and deeply cherished was about to be brutally shattered. The world from which they had sought refuge had found them, its long, grasping arm reaching into the tranquil heart of their sanctuary, threatening to unravel everything they had so painstakingly built. The tranquility they had so painstakingly cultivated was shattered by the rude intrusion of distant, yet steadily approaching sounds. The mountain, usually a sanctuary of silence, now carried the heavy, unmistakable rhythm of multiple horses and the gruff, deliberate voices of men. Eliza stiffened, her senses instantly translating the discordant symphony of approaching danger. These were not the hurried, cautious sounds of lone travelers, but the purposeful, arrogant advance of those accustomed to taking what they desired. It was the lowlands, with its relentless greed and long, grasping arm, reaching into their hard-won peace. Corbett, the auctioneer of human fates, was a man consumed by avarice. Rumors, wildly exaggerated and born of bitter envy from Serenity Creek, had trickled down the valley. Whispers of Silas unearthing an ancient silver mine in the mountains. A fantastical tale had taken root. Corbett, ever opportunistic, saw Eliza not as a person, but as a misplaced asset, a leverage point. He reasoned that her contract, purchased hastily by the reclusive mountain man, must not have been properly settled. He would reclaim her, he decided, and through her, compel Silas to surrender his imagined riches. So Corbett and his crude entourage, a small band of heavily armed, boisterous men, began their ascent. They rode with an arrogant confidence, their loud voices carrying easily on the crisp mountain air, their intentions laid bare with every crude jest and self-satisfied boast. They spoke of the mountain man as a naive hermit, of Eliza as a simple blind girl, a mere chattel to be retrieved. They envisioned a swift, easy reclamation, a triumphant return to Serenity Creek with their new property, and, if their fabricated rumors held true, a fortune in silver. Their words, loud and contemptuous, painted a vivid, chilling picture of their callous disregard for the lives they intended to disrupt. Eliza heard every word, every plan, every boast, her heart sinking with a cold dread but also hardening with a fierce, protective resolve. Silas, ever vigilant, sensed the shift in the mountain air, the subtle vibrations of approaching disturbance even before Eliza spoke. But it was her acute hearing, her ability to dissect the layers of sound, that confirmed his suspicions and provided the crucial details. She described the number of horses, the heavy, impatient tread of the men, the direction from which they approached, and the chilling content of their self-assured pronouncements. They were coming for her, to take her from the only home she had ever truly known, from the only man who had ever truly seen her. The mountain man's face, usually impassive, hardened into a mask of grim determination. The solitude he had so fiercely guarded, the peace he had slowly allowed to bloom with Eliza's presence, was under siege. His sanctuary, their home, was threatened. He would not allow it to be defiled, nor would he permit Eliza to be dragged back to the cruel judgment of the lowlands. The protector within him, long dormant, now surged to the surface, fierce and unyielding. But the approaching threat was more complex than mere thuggish reclamation. As Eliza continued to listen, discerning every nuance in their advancing conversation, a more insidious detail emerged. One of Corbett's men, a shadowy figure from Eliza's own past in Serenity Creek, a man named Jedediah, who had once been a suitor of her mother's and held a quiet, bitter resentment for her father, was among them. His voice, usually subservient to Corbett's, now carried a chilling undercurrent of personal vengeance. He spoke of an old, unpaid debt owed to his own family, a debt of honor he claimed her mother's family had promised him in return for a past favor, a favor that ultimately led to Eliza's birth, and thus her mother's perceived downfall. Jedediah was not simply a hired thug. He was a silent accomplice fueled by a long-held secret grievance, twisting Corbett's scheme into a personal crusade of retribution. He saw Eliza as a tangible symbol of that old injustice, a means to finally exact his bitter price. The realization brought a fresh wave of despair, quickly replaced by a profound, steel-edged resolve. Eliza was not merely fleeing a cruel master. She was an unwitting pawn in a far older, more tangled web of resentment and broken promises. This was not just about a debt or rumored silver. It was about possession, control, and a dark, unresolved past now violently colliding with her fragile present. Silas, upon hearing of Jedediah's presence and his twisted motivations, felt a cold knot tighten in his gut. The fight had become far more personal, far more dangerous. He could defend his home, fight off Corbett and his men, but to protect Eliza fully, to sever the deep historical tendrils of this conflict, required more than just physical prowess. It required a strategic sacrifice, a gamble that could cost him everything. As the sounds of the approaching party grew alarmingly close, their boisterous voices echoing through the pine trees, Silas began to formulate a desperate plan. He would use the mountain itself as their greatest weapon. But Eliza, her mind working with a clarity born of desperate love and fierce protection, arrived at a decision that chilled him to the core. To save him, to protect their home, to truly break the cycle of ownership and claim that had plagued her life, she would offer herself. "I will go to them," she stated, her voice trembling but firm, her hand gripping Silas's arm with an unexpected strength. "They want me. They see me as the key to your riches. Let me go. I will go with them and lead them away from here, away from our home. I will buy you time. You will follow, but at a distance. I will make sure they never find the spring, never truly touch what is ours." Her words were a stark, breathtaking act of self-sacrifice, a profound gesture of love and protection. She was willing to return to the very clutches of her tormentors, to place herself in mortal danger, to save the man who had given her a home, and in doing so, offered her the truest glimpse of herself. It was a choice born of fierce devotion, a strategic gamble that echoed the deep, silent current of their bond, proving that the deepest vision came not from sight, but from the heart. The harsh light of dawn, cold and unforgiving, illuminated the perilous scene as Eliza descended the mountain path, escorted by Corbett and his rough-hewn men. Her decision, a calculated act of sacrifice, weighed heavily in the silent air. She walked with a quiet dignity, her head held high, her senses acutely aware of every step, every rustle of the wind, every grumble of her captors. Corbett, gloating and self-satisfied, believed he held all the cards, convinced he was leading her back to a subservient existence, unaware of the profound strength that pulsed beneath her calm exterior. Jedediah, his eyes burning with a vindictive fire, watched her with a chilling satisfaction, believing his long-awaited retribution was finally at hand. Silas, a shadow among the trees, tracked them relentlessly. His heart pounded with a primal fear for Eliza, but his mind, honed by years of mountain survival, was a crucible of strategy. He moved with the stealth of a phantom, using every crevice, every thicket, every shift in the wind to remain unseen, unheard. He knew the mountain's every secret, every hidden path, every treacherous drop. He was not merely following, he was orchestrating, guiding them into a trap of his own design. Eliza, meanwhile, played her part with remarkable courage. When Corbett pressed her about Silas's supposed silver mine, her answers were vague, evasive, always pointing towards a fictional path further up the mountain, a direction that led only to impassable terrain and dead ends. Her blindness, once a perceived weakness, became her greatest weapon. She feigned confusion, stumbled on purpose, and subtly guided their path towards increasingly difficult and perilous stretches of the mountain, frustrating Corbett's men and subtly delaying their progress. She used the very sounds around her to paint a convincing, yet misleading picture for her captors, her voice laced with an innocence that belied her cunning. As they approached the twin waterfall that haunted Silas's map and Eliza's locket, a place of sacred memory and treacherous beauty, the setting for the final confrontation became clear. This was a narrow, winding gorge, its walls steep and unforgiving, a natural amphitheater where sound echoed eerily, magnifying every rustle and whisper. Here, the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient stone, and the roar of the hidden waterfalls created a disorienting symphony of sound. Corbett, growing impatient, demanded that Eliza lead them directly to the mythical silver lode. Jedediah, fueled by his bitter past, stepped forward, his hand gripping her arm, his voice a low, venomous hiss. He spoke of the old debt, of the shame her family had brought upon his, of his right to finally claim what he believed was owed. But as he spoke, Eliza, with a swift, unexpected movement, used her knowledge of the terrain she had learned to see with her feet. She deliberately stumbled, pulling Jedediah off balance, sending him sprawling towards a hidden, moss-covered crevice that Silas had previously pointed out to her as particularly dangerous. As Jedediah struggled, Silas chose his moment. He did not engage in a direct, brutal fight. Instead, he employed the mountain itself as his ally. From above, he sent a cascade of loose stones tumbling down the gorge, not aimed at injuring, but at disorienting Corbett's men. The roar of the falling rocks, amplified by the gorge's acoustics, combined with the deafening crash of the waterfalls, created utter chaos. Horses whinnied and bucked, men shouted in confusion, and the carefully constructed order of Corbett's group dissolved into a panicked frenzy. In the midst of the pandemonium, Silas descended like a wraith, moving with impossible speed and silence. He disabled the horses, cutting their reins, forcing them to flee. He did not attack the men directly, but used his intimate knowledge of the gorge to render them helpless. He tripped one into a shallow, icy stream, disarmed another by knocking his weapon into a deep fissure, and used the echoing sounds to make his presence seem multiplied, a phantom force surrounding them. The chaos was his weapon, and Eliza's quick thinking had created the perfect opening. Corbett, realizing he was utterly outmaneuvered, his men scattered and disoriented, his grandiose plans crumbling around him, roared in frustration. But it was Jedediah, struggling to extract himself from the crevice, who offered the unexpected resolution. As he clawed his way out, his hand scraped against a loose rock, revealing not silver, but a hidden, ancient carving, a symbol of the twin waterfalls, a mark of Silas's ancestral claim to this land. It was the same symbol etched on Eliza's locket. This was not a silver mine, but a sacred, ancient ground, a place of historical significance, tying Silas's lineage to Eliza's. Jedediah, confronted by this ancient truth, suddenly understood the folly of his personal vendetta. His family's debt was not one of silver, but of land, of heritage, of a shared history with the mountain man's people. His long-held grievance, built on a lie, shattered, leaving him with nothing but a profound, humiliating shame. Silas, standing tall amidst the chaos, made no grand pronouncements. He simply gave Corbett a choice: leave and never return, or face the full, unforgiving wrath of the mountain. Seeing the unwavering resolve in Silas's eyes, and knowing he was utterly outmatched, Corbett, defeated and humiliated, gathered his remaining men and retreated, leaving Jedediah to his silent shame. The threat was vanquished not through bloodshed, but through cunning, courage, and the profound, almost mystical connection between two outcasts and their mountain. Yet, as the last of Corbett's men disappeared down the winding trail, a new question hung in the crisp mountain air. The mountain had witnessed their victory, but its power was not absolute. The lure of the lowlands, the whispers of hidden riches, the endless human folly, these were not easily extinguished. Jedediah, shaken by the revelation of the ancient carving, remained, a lone figure at the base of the twin waterfalls, his past shattered, his future uncertain. He had been a part of the threat, but now, stripped of his vengeance, he was merely a man lost, a stray element of the conflict, a stark reminder that even after the storm, the world remained a complex, dangerous place. His presence, silent and forlorn, was a lingering question mark on their hard-won peace, a fragile thread connecting their triumphant present to an unpredictable future. 9 months later, the mountain cabin, once a bastion of rugged solitude, hummed with a new, vibrant life. The silence that Silas had once cherished was now frequently punctuated by the soft gurgle of a newborn, the gentle creak of a rocking chair, and Eliza's quiet, lilting lullabies. The harsh edges of their existence had softened, not in compromise but in transformation. The cabin, once merely a shelter against the elements, was now undeniably a home, imbued with the warmth of shared love and the promise of a future. Eliza, no longer the blind girl bought from an auction block, but a radiant mother, moved with a newfound confidence and grace. Her hands, once only adept at mending torn cloth, now cradled their child, her touch exquisite in its tenderness. Silas, the stoic mountain man, found his gruff exterior slowly melting away under the gentle gaze of his son and the unwavering love of his wife. He still stalked the forests, hunted the game, and chopped the wood. But now his efforts were imbued with a different purpose, a profound commitment to the thriving family within his mountain sanctuary. He would return from his expeditions not to silence, but to the welcoming embrace of a home filled with the gentle sounds of life, the comforting scent of a warm meal, and the profound peace of belonging. The Twin Waterfalls, once a place of violent confrontation, had been reclaimed as their sacred ground. Jedediah, stripped of his vengeance and left humbled by the ancient carving, did not return to Serenity Creek. Instead, he found a quiet, almost penitent purpose. He became their silent guardian, tending to a small, secluded patch of land downstream, occasionally leaving a carefully chosen bundle of fresh-caught fish or a wild harvest of berries on their doorstep, a silent offering of atonement and respect. He had seen the truth, and though he remained apart, he contributed to their burgeoning peace, a testament to the mountain's capacity for both justice and unexpected reconciliation. One clear autumn afternoon, as their son, a robust, bright-eyed boy, took his first wobbly steps on the packed earth floor, Eliza found herself by the hearth, her hand brushing against a loose stone. It dislodged slightly, revealing a small, hidden compartment. Inside, nestled among dried herbs, was a leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age. It was Silas's mother's journal, long thought lost, filled with elegant script. As Eliza's fingers traced the faded words, Silas, watching his son, began to speak, his voice soft with memory. He told her of his mother's deep connection to the mountain, her profound respect for its secrets, her belief that true vision was not of the eyes, but of the heart. And there, inscribed on the final page, a revelation awaited Eliza. Not in silver or gold, but in words that echoed her own journey. The journal spoke of a legend, passed down through the women of Silas's lineage. When the mountain offers its deepest solace, it will guide the heart that truly listens to the one who sees with no eyes. Together, they will reclaim the ancient spring, and from its healing waters a new line will be born, strong and true, their roots forever bound to this sacred land. The ancient spring, the very location hinted at in Silas's map and symbolized by Eliza's locket, was not just a place of healing, it was a promise, a prophecy fulfilled in their improbable union. The discovery was a final, profound truth, binding their pasts, present, and future into a singular, beautiful tapestry. Eliza was not merely a refugee who found love. She was the missing piece of an ancient prophecy, a woman whose unique perception was destined to unlock the deepest secrets of the mountain, to heal its protector, and to give birth to a new legacy. Their son, the fruit of their profound bond, was not just their child, but the living embodiment of that ancient promise, a bridge between two lineages, two worlds, destined to carry the wisdom of both. The mountain, with its vast, silent expanse, had become their silent witness, their enduring home. It had tested them, challenged them, and ultimately forged them into something stronger, truer, than either could have been alone. The mountain man, once a prisoner of his own solitude, had found redemption not in isolation, but in the fierce, protective love for his family. The blind girl, once rejected by a world that refused to see her, had found her true vision not in her eyes, but in the boundless depths of her heart and in the profound, unwavering connection to the man who truly listened. Their story was not merely one of survival against the odds, but a powerful testament to the enduring truth that courage is found in the quiet acts of care, that family is forged not by blood, but by the battles fought and won together, and that a true home is not a place on a map, but a feeling of absolute belonging, a sanctuary built within the embrace of a love that sees beyond all limitations. Did you enjoy this journey? Tell us from what corner of the world you're watching this story from. Leave your comment, and to make sure you don't miss the next adventure, subscribe to the channel.